Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving straight into some absolutely fascinating data from July 30, 2026, to unpack what's rapidly becoming the defining theme of our current global market. We're calling this explainer the risk-return divide, because right now, the world is effectively splitting into two entirely different realities. On one side, we're facing incredibly high-stakes physical risks, geopolitical conflicts, fragile supply chains, drastically shifting climate patterns. But then, on the other side, we have these massive multi-billion-dollar digital bets being placed on artificial intelligence. So how do these two completely different worlds collide? And more importantly, how do they separate the winners from the folks who are just left exposed to all this volatility? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today. Okay, let's dive into this. We've organized today's massive global shifts into four interconnected themes. First, global conflict and energy. Second, the AI investment divide. Third, systemic climate and health. And finally, career and consumer impacts. Starting right off with Section 1, global conflict and energy, or what we can call the physical stakes. So, the diplomatic pauses of the past are officially gone. They've been replaced by active military escalation, and the physical map of global trade is literally shifting right beneath our feet. To really grasp the sheer scale of this, we just have to map out the geographic chaos unfolding right this minute. The U.S. has resumed large-scale direct military strikes against dozens of Iranian Revolutionary Guard facilities. We're talking about a massive 2-hour operation hitting command centers and maritime defenses, especially around Qasem Island. And this was a direct response to an attempted missile attack against American forces, where Jordan actually had to step in and intercept 5 Iranian missiles before they could hit their targets. But the ripple effects definitely don't stop there. Over in the Red Sea, Saudi forces have struck Houthi military sites around Yemen, all while trying to form an international coalition to protect shipping lanes from transit fees and ongoing threats. The economic impact of all this physical friction, it's completely immediate. It's pushed Brent crude oil prices up to roughly $91.80 a barrel. The physical movement of energy is just under immense stress right now. But here's where the whole concept of risk versus return gets incredibly stark. While physical shipping routes are fracturing and global tensions are spiking, the companies positioned to capture that volatility are posting absolutely jaw-dropping numbers. Shell just reported a staggering $9.84 billion in quarterly profit. I mean, that is more than double their total from a year earlier, making it their second highest total on record. How'd they pull that off? Well, they ran their refineries at roughly 102% of their stated capacity to completely capitalize on those elevated fuel prices and market volatility. It just goes to show, one side's physical risk is another side's massive financial return. Let's move to and see how this builds into our next theme. Section 2, the AI investment divide, or the digital stakes. As we shift gears from physical battlegrounds to the digital battlefield of artificial intelligence, we're seeing two completely different sides of the AI coin. Take Microsoft. They are showing accelerating cloud returns, boasting a massive 30 million paid users for Microsoft 365 Copilot, and cloud revenue hitting $59.3 billion. It's huge. But then contrast that with Meta. Even though their revenues slightly beat expectations, their actual earnings missed the market forecast. Why? Because they're getting hammered with rising legal costs and massive infrastructure expenses. It's actually so heavy that they've had to raise their capital spending forecast to a staggering $145 billion. The market's reaction to this was swift. Meta shares dropped because investors are demanding a much clearer, more immediate connection between all this heavy infrastructure spending and actual future profits. Meanwhile, Microsoft shares rose because they're already proving that connection exists. And honestly, nothing proves that connection quite like this specific number, $90 billion. That is Microsoft's total quarterly revenue, which is an 18% increase from a year earlier. Azure revenue alone grew by 43%. What this data is screaming at us is that enterprise AI adoption is finally moving past that experimental, hey, let's just test this out phase, and it's crossing over into reliable, reoccurring software spending. Investors will absolutely support historically massive spending, like Microsoft's $41 billion capital budget, but for sure only when the revenue growth and customer adoption are equally visible. All right, from a $90 billion tech triumph, we have to make a pretty hard pivot here to a deeply jarring public health reality. 2,318. That is the number of recorded measles cases in the United States right now. It marks the highest annual total in 35 years. And what's really concerning is that approximately 69% of these infections involve people under the age of 20. This is being driven by national MMR vaccination coverage falling to around 92.5%, with 16 states actually dropping below the critical 90% threshold. Which brings us right into Section 3, Systemic Climate and Health, and these shifting systemic pressures. We're seeing how underlying environmental pressures are creating these slow-moving systemic risks that perfectly parallel the sudden geopolitical tensions we talked about earlier. Right now, the European Union is actively having to reposition its firefighting resources as severe wildfire danger shifts toward Italy, Greece, and Central Europe. And these aren't just standard fires either. They are large enough to generate pyrocumulonimbus clouds. Think about that. Literally, weather systems born from fire that produce their own strong winds and lightning. Meanwhile, El Niño is strengthening, and while NOAA expects a below-normal Atlantic hurricane season with just 8 to 14 named storms, our source data carries a really vital warning here. A quieter storm season does not eliminate risk. Weaker or slow-moving tropical systems still carry immense localized flash flood threats. Lower storm counts absolutely do not necessarily translate into lower climate losses. Compounding these physical environmental risks is the sheer fragility of our daily supply chains. We see this clearly in a major active health trace. Michigan and 4 other states are currently managing an outbreak of more than 8,100 cases of cyclosporasis. This is a prolonged infection tied to contaminated food or water, likely originating from shared produce suppliers. What makes this a nightmare for federal investigators is that the delayed symptoms make it incredibly hard for patients to remember exactly what they ate and when. It is a prime example of just how interconnected and, quite frankly, vulnerable our basic consumer systems remain today. So we've talked about missile intercepts, $90 billion tech revenues, shifting wildfires, and major health outbreaks. Let's take a breath for a second and ask the most important question. What does all this macro-level data actually mean for your daily life? How do these massive global and systemic forces dictate your immediate reality? That leads us to our final section, Section 4, Career and Consumer Impacts, the human element of it all. So the crucial point is that all of these sprawling global events ultimately trickle down into everyday jobs, physical infrastructure demands, and how we spend our own money. Both the digital bets and the physical conflicts are driving massive, highly specific employment demands. Just look at the new job market being created right this second. The AI boom isn't just about writing software. Microsoft's massive capital budget means they desperately need construction workers, electrical experts, and cooling specialists to build out the physical data centers. AI projects now require highly specialized finance teams that can evaluate debt and long-term capacity. On the other side of the divide, renewed fighting in the Middle East and new shipping coalitions are instantly driving up demand for air defense production, maritime surveillance, and logistics personnel. Macro risks are actively creating micro-career opportunities. And what about us as everyday consumers? Well, despite broader financial pressures and a world that feels increasingly chaotic and digital, there is a really deep human craving for simple, reliable physical experiences. Starbucks just reported a 7.9% jump in global same-store sales under CEO Brian Niccol. By simply simplifying their menu and cutting down wait times, they are restoring customer traffic. Turns out, younger consumers in particular are still fiercely prioritizing their daily coffee ritual. Familiarity and just reliable, solid execution are incredibly valuable right now. Which brings us to the core thesis of today's explainer, captured perfectly in this quote derived from our daily analysis. The durable career advantage remains the ability to translate strategic investment into reliable daily operations. Whether you're a tech giant rolling out enterprise AI systems, an energy company managing volatile supply chains, or a coffee chain serving millions of morning lattes, the ultimate differentiator is execution. Having a grand strategy is no longer enough. Investors and consumers alike are demanding flawless daily operations to bridge that gap between risk and return. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. In a world increasingly split between high-stakes physical risks and massive digital bets, are you positioned for the return, or are you exposed to the volatility? The data from July 30, 2026 shows us that this divide is only getting wider. Understanding these interconnected themes is your very first step toward navigating them successfully. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.